Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's video. If you're new to the channel, my name's Joey, and this is my channel, Burtoni Motors. It's my place for motorcycles and cars and basically anything with an engine. If I want to talk about it, this is the place that I do it. In today's video, I'm standing with my 2020 Ducati Panigale V2, which, if you guys have listened to previous videos, it's one of my favorite motorcycles I've ever ridden. It's so good. I had to buy it, right? Last year, I had money down on the new Street Fighter V4. Love that bike. I thought it was everything that I wanted in a bike. And then there were delivery issues, and I was like, oh man, well, maybe I'll try something different. I was really set on the V4, but I jumped on the V2 just for the sake of it. And I was ultimately won over. It is one of the best engines I've ever ridden on a motorcycle. The positioning's great. The sound is phenomenal, especially with that exhaust. It's a spectacular motorcycle. It truly is. You know, I took it. I've been riding it around in Michigan. I took it out to Colorado, where I was out there for almost over a month, put 2,000 miles on it when I was out there. I've ridden this bike a lot over the last year, a little over a year of ownership. And I want to talk about some things that, you know, it is a great bike. It's a wonderful bike. It's almost a perfect bike, but it can't be perfect. No bike can be perfect. There's always got to be something going on with it. So in today's video, we're going to go through the 9 things, and like they're very small things, but they are things that irk me just a bit about my 2020 Ducati Panigale V2. So if that sounds interesting, let's jump into the video and I will go through what's going on with this V2. Okay, so number 1 on the list. This is probably the biggest issue that I've had with this motorcycle over the last, say, year and a half that I've owned it. And looking through some of the Ducati forums, through Facebook, things like that, I'm not the only one who's had this issue. And it's the battery. The battery on this bike has left me stranded twice. And it could not just be the battery, it could be the electrical system, it could be whatever it is, right? So what happened, the bike's plugged in, it starts every single time, it's fine. But the moment it's away from a charger, there's something going on where the battery won't replenish itself, and if I stop anywhere, try to turn it back over, it lays flat. It means it won't start up. It's left me stranded twice in my life. The first time I was like 2 blocks away, so it wasn't bad. I was actually able to push it to Ducati, which was a really dumb situation as I was in full leathers, backpack, every filming gear, all of that, and I had to push the bike over to Ducati. The second time I was a few miles away, and the bike had to wait overnight for them to come pick it up. What happens the first 2 times, they couldn't find an issue with it. The battery said it was working well, no issues at all. The third time I was upset. I was like, fix this. This isn't supposed to happen. There's something wrong with the bike. Fix what's going on. And they replaced the battery. I've had no issues since. That's my recommendation. If you have a V2 and you've had any battery or electrical issues like that, and I've seen a few of you guys on Facebook say the same thing, just point them to that story, have them swap out the battery. Now that I have this battery, the bike literally works perfect every single time, no issue whatsoever. But that was the most frustrated I think I've been in a long time buying a brand new, $20,000+ motorcycle when it doesn't start up when I want it to start up. Very frustrating experience. Not something that you would expect from a motorcycle of this quality. Something that very much irks me. But that's number 1. All right, number 2. So this isn't like a really big issue until it becomes an issue. When I bought this bike, I had to get insurance for the bike, right? You have to have insurance to ride a motorcycle. The Ducati V2 isn't really a motorcycle per se. It's kind of like an evolution of the previous Panigale 959. So even in the insurance agencies like record books, when you're trying to get insurance on a V2, they won't be able to find it. And it became a whole rigmarole. I haven't used that word in a while. Became a big issue because they couldn't find the bike. They couldn't insure me. They were like, oh, it's a V4. And I'm like, no, it's not a V4 because a V4 has, 200+ horsepower and it would be twice as much to insure. they're like, oh, but they don't make a 959 anymore. So it was a struggle to get that done. And that's just the insurance part, right? Like, I feel like a good example of what this is like Apple, right? Apple doesn't release new products. They release like an evolution of the product where it's changed just enough to make it new, make it wanted, whatever. Ducati changed just enough of this bike to make it new. But there are still parts that fit on it from the 959, but not all of them. And I think it's very important to realize that not everything from the 959 will fit on this bike. When I was talking with a few aftermarket companies on like, oh, what works, what doesn't work, they didn't know because they didn't have the time and experience to work on this bike to create parts. So they're like, oh, 959 parts work. When in reality, they don't. A few things that I've changed on the bike for 959 parts didn't work right away. So I had to wait for either a V4 version, like this fender eliminator kit. This is supposed to be for a V4, but it works for a V2, or like the bolts themselves that go into the handlebars to mount my Rizoma mirrors. Those are V4 parts and not V2 or 959. I guess that's always the struggle of buying a new motorcycle, is the aftermarket always takes a few weeks, months, years to get on board, get everything created, all of that. While the Ducati had a lot of aftermarket parts available-ish, most of them were from like actual like factory supported, like dealer supported companies like Rizoma, right? But even like Rizoma, there were still issues trying to find the right pieces for this bike. So just be aware. I feel like, a year and a half after this bike came out, you should be fine. Companies started making V2 specific parts, but just in case you're wondering, not all 959 parts fit on the V2. All right, number 3, cost. When you buy a Ducati, you know it's gonna be expensive, right? It was one of those things, I treated it myself. I turned 30 years old. I've had a successful career in advertising. I've seen New York, I've seen Germany, and now I'm in Detroit. I felt like I hate the feeling of saying like you deserve something, but I wanted to spoil myself for my 30th birthday. So I bought myself a V2. I love the bike, right? I'm probably not gonna sell this bike anytime soon. It's a great bike. That being said, the cost associated with this motorcycle is atrocious. Truly atrocious, just disgusting. The bike itself starts at $17. The exhaust was $5,400. The fender eliminator kit was like $300. The mirrors on both sides were like $400. The levers were another like $200 a pop. The indicator cutoffs were like $200. The insurance per year, my insurance was like $2,500 a year, and that is, and compared to that to like my Royal Enfield, which is like $500, or my BMW drift car, which is like $300, right? The insurance on this bike itself is crazy. Everything associated with this bike is expensive. And when you compare it to like a Japanese equivalent of this motorcycle, and I know that there's not like, there is an equivalent, but there really isn't, right? When you're buying a Ducati, you're buying a Ferrari of motorcycles, buying a Lamborghini of motorcycles. When you're buying a Japanese motorcycle, there's a reason why their 600cc's or their liter bikes are still in that like $12,000 range versus the V2, which starts at 17 and can easily go way, past 20, depending on what options you get from the factory and like what you put on in aftermarket. But like the exhaust itself, the exhaust from factory to keep your warranty is $5,400. And yeah, I'm gonna throw some B-roll of the exhaust right now. Like, it's sexy. It's a great sounding exhaust. It's one of the best sounding exhausts I think I've ever heard on a motorcycle. When you like drive, it sounds like gunshots going off. Like, pow, 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 pow. This engine's spectacular. Sorry, mine going crazy on the side, on the tangent over there. But it's $5,400 for an Acropovic exhaust. Yes, it's a full exhaust. But when you're looking at like a Ninja 600 or a Ninja 1000 or like whatever, a Yamaha R7, those exhaust for an Acro or a Toshi or, Termagani or whatever it may be, and I just butchered some words, they're like $1,200, $1,300, max $1,500. Where does the $5,400, like how do you get an exhaust that's literally the same thing? It's the same amount of metal, the same amount of carbon, the same amount of everything. How is it almost 3 times the price? And like that's the world you live in when you buy a Ducati. Nothing is cheap. You have to use special oil, you have to use special brake fluid, you have to use whatever it may be. Everything's expensive. don't think when you jump into this bike that it's just gonna be, 16 grand out the door, whatever. No, it's gonna be expensive. It's gonna be a long life of being expensive. And if you're really having a hard time justifying that like 16, 17 grand to buy the bike, remember it's gonna be closer to 20 grand out the door with taxes, insurance, and all that. And if you jump into the comments and be like, well, I got mine for 15 grand out the door. Cool, you're 1 in a million. Like, it's probably your friends of friends or whatever it may be. We don't need to hear that story. And if you guys want to hear more about all costs associated with this bike, at the 1 year mark, I quantified every single dollar that I spent on this bike, and that video is on my channel. It's called Ducati Panigale V2 total cost of ownership 1 year. Look through that video. Watch it. I think it's really interesting. One thing that I get a lot of shit on that I don't understand, because I think it's one of the most valuable things that I've had on this bike, is the tire and wheel protection that I bought from the factory. It was like $900, covers me for 3 years, and anytime I get a flat, I get new tires. I've already got 2 flats on this bike, 2 flats, 1 actual flat, and then I needed to get a new rear tire replaced because I rode it a little hard. Stuff like that. Take it into the dealership, you get new tires. It's great. When you consider each one of these tires is about 200 bucks, and now with the cost of tires and rubber going up right now, it's closer to 250. It pays for itself in 3 tires. And these wheels themselves are almost 4 grand. So if heaven forbid, like these Michigan roads suck, heaven forbid I hit a pothole or anything like that, I'm saving myself a shit ton of money. I think it was probably one of the more valuable things that I bought with this bike. But that's it for cost. Okay, so I had to jump to this side of the bike because my next issue is with the kickstand. The kickstand's a pain in the ass to get down. It really is a pain in the ass. Especially when you're in like leather gear, you're in your tracksuit, you got your boots on. It's a bitch. A few people have said like, take it from behind the peg and that helps. I'm gonna show you like what I've had to do. Basically, like you tuck your toe in at like a weird angle and you just like hope for the best and push down and hope that your foot gets it. Some days it works well. The first few weeks, like I couldn't do it. Like it was painful to get off this bike because I was such an idiot. Here, I'll show you what it is now. So here, so behind the peg, so can't do it there. That's what it is. So you put your foot behind the peg and drop it down. Obviously it's much easier in shorts and these shoes. But in full riding gear, it's not very easy. Don't come after me because I have a hard time using the kickstand. I feel really dumb. So, I don't want to lay on my bike. I hate that. I hate doing that. With a bike that has a quick shifter, it has wheelie control, it has multiple riding modes, it's got everything that you can imagine electronically. The bike is a supercomputer. It's crazy to see the power, the electronic computing power that's on this motorcycle. Like, it's got wheelie control. It tells you, it can stop your bike at a certain degree when you're riding. That's crazy. What it doesn't have, and it's something that almost all my other motorcycles have, my Royal's not here, but like other bikes that I've ridden, especially at the same age, fuel range. Just like a car, I would love to have a fuel range counter on this bike. That changes to how you're riding, right? Sometimes I ride quick and I only get 100 miles out of the tank. Sometimes I ride slow and I get 200 miles out of the tank. Things like that would be really beneficial. And yeah, I know there's a mathematical equation like, oh, set your trip, when you get your gas, you reset your tripometer, and then you divide by 3 or something like that. Like, I don't want to do math. I bought this bike so I don't have to do math. I don't need a calculator. This bike's a calculator. Just a bug. Got him. It would be really nice to have a fuel range gauge. That's it. All right, this next one. If you've ever looked into the Ducati V2, or most Ducatis for that matter, you're going to see one common characteristic that applies to every one of these motorcycles. And that is that it runs hot. It runs extremely hot. On nice summer days, I've had this engine peak at 220 degrees. The fans kick on, the fans stay on for an hour after the bike comes to a complete stop. The bike is warm, especially with the exhaust that come up so close to your leg. It gets extremely hot. In the fall, in the spring, when it's a little chilly outside, it's perfect. It's like a butt warmer on the bike, and I have absolutely no complaints. The moment full leathers come on in the late summer, late spring, early summer, not today though, it's almost July. It's the end of June right now, and I'm wearing a sweater. Yeah, I'm wearing shorts, but like, it's like 50 degrees outside. It's weird. This is a perfect bike right now. But 220 degrees, basically like daily riding, this bike is over 200 degrees. So be prepared. Never ride this motorcycle with shorts on. Never ride this bike without proper gear. Be prepared for the heat. It's bringing the heat. I don't know. Isn't that like a saying or something? Like, we bring the heat, I don't do sports, obviously, but like I don't watch sports either. I think that's a sports thing. Go sports ball. I'm gonna say something really controversial with this next one, so be prepared. I don't like Ducati's red. I know there's some booing going on. You guys hate me. That's fine. I don't find it attractive. I don't like the color red. I don't like the color black. I've never enjoyed that color combination growing up or on cars or anything like that. Never been a fan. And then they brought the V2 out in white. And I feel like I hate that color even more. Colors that I would love to see on this bike. And I've talked about getting it painted and livery and stuff like that. And instead of doing that, I bought a BMW drift car. Priorities, right? I really like Ducati's yellow. I think the yellow is a stunning color. I think there's a few people, one of my friends, Ducati Poppy, he has a V4 in this like neon fluorescent yellow. I think that's great. It's a little too much for me, too modern. I would love to see this in British Racing Green, or I don't know, like a baby blue, like an Aston Martin baby blue, not or the Mercedes China blue. There are a lot of colors out there that I would like to see on this bike. Slate gray, something like that. I don't know like color philosophy and color design. But when I talk about colors on my bike with all my car designer friends, they tell me things like the word flop, which is like where the shadows are. I don't get that. I just like color. But yeah, the Ducati yellow from like, I think it's like the 748, that bike. I would love to see that yellow on this V2. It's crazy because like, yeah, there's a lot of like red stuff behind me right now. And over there, I never thought I'd be buying a red Ducati. What I do like is the new matte black Street Fighter. I think that looks great. And it would be great to have that black on this bike. I think you would lose some of the dimension of the bodywork, but like, it is what it is. On the plus side, alternative side of this conversation, even if you don't know motorcycles, you know the Ducati red. You know this red means fast, it means fancy, it means expensive, it means loud, it means all of these things. So you have to find there's a little bit of value in that. I don't like to show off. That's also have an issue with this bike, is that it's always showing off. I'm a pretty like understated kind of guy. I don't like showing money at all. And this bike does the exact opposite of what my like general philosophy in the world is, which is kind of funny in itself. But give us some more options, Ducati. Give me something fun. I don't know. Give me a green. I guess that's why they have paint shops and liveries and stuff like that. I even thought about like covering it up with like my own livery, like basically like a giant sticker pack that goes across it. You know, Burtoni Motors, Racing, 7-Eleven, Slim Jim, Trojan. I don't know. It's a joke. But not a big fan of the red. That's just me. Okay. This one is a little small, but I wanted to show you guys. See that throttle play? This is a real jumpy engine to begin with, right? There's a shit ton of torque. It's got that V2 power, right? If you've never ridden this engine, it's snappy. And when you have a loose throttle, it's two negative things against each other. It makes riding this bike very hard because it's not a very smooth bike like a inline 4 or the Panigale V4. Obviously there are ways to change that, get a new one. it just seems like you shouldn't have to do that when you're buying a $20,000 motorcycle, right? This slack should be gone, my opinion. All right, this next one, it's kind of like a combination of two things, right? One thing, this is in a very aggressive riding position. You're buying a sport bike, it's gonna be an aggressive riding position. That being said, you have to like, I don't have to stretch before I ride this bike, but I have to think about stretching. Your lower back kind of is at a really interesting angle for long rides. I've been able to do 300 miles in a single day on this bike with no issues, but the next days I'm a little sore, especially my wrist. They say you're not supposed to have any weight on your wrist, but when you're at like lower speeds, for some reason the weight is transferred a little more to the front of the bike, which is fine. It is what it is. But my wrist, I do stretch them often. I do have issues with my wrist anyway because I spend, the majority of my life on a keyboard typing away like a corporate monkey. But that is what it is. So just be prepared. I do some like wrist stretches, wrist exercises, things like that. Now, paired with the next thing I'm about to say. The tank of your bike scratches really easily. Really easily. I put a protector on it, but I put a protector on too late, which is my fault. When you get on the bike, your jacket, no matter like where your zipper is, it's basically going to sit on the tank. And even when you have like a nice special jacket with like where the zipper isn't present because the leather covers it, there's still a little bit of metal. And I got a few little nicks on my paint job and I fucking hate it. It drives me insane that Ducati would let me walk out of the dealership fully aware that that's going to happen the moment I got on this bike. I wish they were just like, yo, for $50, you wouldn't have to think about that ever again because we're just gonna put the tank protector on that. I wish they didn't. But they didn't. That's my frustration. Now, even with all of these issues, it's still my favorite bike. It's my favorite motorcycle. I absolutely love my Ducati Panigale V2. It is one of the most special motorcycles that I've ever ridden. And I don't think I'm not gonna sell it anytime soon, right? I don't know what I would ever replace it with unless Ducati brings a Street Fighter V2 because this engine is great. This engine makes the motorcycle. Sport bikes, I've never owned a sport bike before because I've never enjoyed that riding position or that style or things like that. But this engine makes this bike what it truly is. This was my list of 9 things. I'm interested. Like, do you have these same issues that I do? Do you think there are more out there? Let me know in the comments, guys. And like, what else would I want out of this bike? There's a lot of things that people ask, like, would you want like an SP version or a SP, like something with like nicer brakes or stiffer suspension and things like that? Sure, like why not? But like it comes with cost. And like the cool thing about Ducati is like they were able to bring this bike to the market for like 16 grand, which is a stunning bike. A lot of people bitch like, oh, why doesn't it have the dilemma, like the M50 block caliper brakes for the front? Well, because those are like 2 grand a pop and that bike would now be 18 grand, right? Just because we want things doesn't mean that they have to happen. Some people have talked about the Showa suspension in the front not being stiff enough for their riding. The suspension is stiff enough for me. I'm not a professional rider. I'm never going to be. And honestly, I can barely tell the difference between a tuned suspension and non-tuned suspension for my weight, height, and riding position. So that is what it is. But I think that's the end of the video, guys. I really appreciate you watching. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you really want to support me in this channel, there's a bunch of Burtoni Motors, new cups, mugs, jackets, anything that you guys could ever want. My neighbor has a Mercedes AMG 63. You can hear it, sounds good. There's a lot of other ways you can support me. The easiest way is to like this video, comment, share with your friends, subscribe to my channel. If you really want to help out, go buy some merch. But I think that's it for right now, guys. I have to head in. It's about 7:30 and I have to go jump start into my day to get some work done. But thank you guys so much for watching. Now go out there and ride safe. Bye, y'all.